Looks like we're live. All right. Adam, don't forget to hit record. I don't know if you can hear me, but hey, everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming. I'm looking at the comments on the side, and we've got people all over the world joining us. 13,000 people have signed up to come listen to these two beautiful souls impart their wisdom. So thank you. Argentina, we got Australia, we've got Mexico, Santa Barbara. Anyways, to my two beautiful friends right here, Joe and Gregg. We've got Gregg Braden from New Mexico, and Joe Dispenza. Thank you guys so much for, being so generous with your time and your hearts and everything that you do to help on a daily basis. Thank you for being here tonight.
Oh, you're welcome.
So we're happy to be here, and I know this hour is going to go by very quickly. I just want to say hello to our global family. We love you, and we love you hanging in there for this new world that's about to emerge, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people are in uncertainty. The nature of life is uncertainty, but right now we're in a heightened sense of it, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety as a result of the unknown about the virus and the unknown about the future, and a lot of lives are being upended. So I just want to, a lot of us just came from watching Heal. We tried to do a Netflix watch party, but apparently too many people showed up and the system crashed, which is fun tidbit. So, but many of you have seen the film before, and I just want to, talk to Gregg and Joe and remind ourselves how much power and intelligence and resilience the human body has, and just some, different things to think about and different maybe tools and practices we can do to emerge on the other side of this, healthier and stronger than ever. So that being said, Gregg, I know you've been keeping up on latest science. You're a scientist yourself, and you've been following the epidemiologists. You did this great video that's on your private YouTube where it's very informative about the viruses in general and in this novel coronavirus. So can you talk just a little bit briefly about what this coronavirus is, and our bodies are designed to fend off viruses and pathogens. Is there any reason why this virus is different, or our bodies, more fearful, or our bodies aren't going to eventually adapt in a season or two, and we'll develop herd immunity and we're going to go back to life, a new life, but okay.
Well, I heard about 3 questions in that question, so let me just kind of lay out a foundation here. So first, I just want to say, Kelly and Joe, in front of our brothers and sisters, thank you both for being here tonight. Kelly, thanks for organizing this, and it's great news that we crashed that Netflix server. That means a lot of people were watching the film. So the video that you're talking about is a presentation. My office, when this all began in March, my staff was receiving so much correspondence from so many different people who had so many different questions and stories. And, they were asking why we couldn't use antibiotics to kill the virus and, things like that. And rather than answer them individually, it's a presentation. It took me about 10 days to research all the references. And, what I want to say to everyone watching, if you're not going to stay for the full hours, is I just want people to know that your body is made for times just like this. And your body, I'm just going to talk directly to everyone watching, your body is so intelligent. Your body has such deep wisdom. The best scientific minds tell us that we anatomically modern humans, that we appeared on Earth about 200,000 years ago. Scientists are in agreement with that. They're not in agreement with how we got here, but they are in agreement of when we showed up 200,000 years ago. And what that tells us is we've got 200,000 years of human experience with contagions and with viruses and with bacteria and all kinds of pathogens in our world, and we have been successful with every one of those. And I see absolutely no reason to believe or suspect that what we're experiencing now is any different. Our bodies know exactly what to do with the virus that's out there right now. I think one of the things that we're all learning, Kelly, you asked again a couple of different questions. Our question, I think, we are on a global pause. We've all got to take a time out. And for some people, that's very disconcerting. For some people, it's frightening not to have the routines, not to have the diversions, not to have the distractions in our everyday lives. So I can look at this from a scientific perspective, and I also look at it from a very human in a deeply spiritual perspective. And there's a place where they come together. There's a place where science and spirituality come together in a really beautiful way. And I think this is one of those places. So I think ultimately what we're asking ourselves, Kelly, and we're all asking ourselves the same question, consciously or unconsciously. Because our bodies know what to do with the pathogens, because our bodies know how to develop the resilience, they know how to develop the antibodies, if we give our bodies what they need to be at their best, and that's the key. So I think the question that we're all asking is, do we love ourselves enough? Do I love myself enough to give my body what my body needs to be at its best in the presence of what life has just brought to our doorstep? And the answer to that question is all the things that we already know that have been kind of anecdotal in the past, and now our lives depend upon the way we answer this question. Do we nourish our bodies with life-sustaining nourishment that comes from the earth rather than manufactured chemicals and combinations of things that are packaged in the factory? Are we getting the kind of sleep that we need to have? Are we moving? You know, the ancients told us that movement is medicine. That's a mantra for me. And it's very, very true. Movement stimulates the immune system, and every day we've got to honor our bodies in some way. If you can go for a walk in nature, you know, that's optimum. Some of us are blessed to live near nature, but even if you cannot do that, movement in your house, yoga, floor exercise, a stationary bike, anything to get your body moving. All of these external factors, stress, reducing or eliminating the stress, which is hard to do if you're losing a job, if you can't pay your mortgage, I understand that. But ultimately, we are asking ourselves about our relationship to our own bodies. And I'll tell you why the way we answer this question is important, because in the not too distant future, this is going to be behind us. It's going to be in the rearview mirror. And there's another world that's waiting for us. But the beauty is that world doesn't exist right now, because we're building it by the way we respond to what it is that's happening in our lives. One of two things is going to happen. And I suspect there are probably going to be two camps, Kelly, two different kinds of perspectives. Some people are going to emerge from this global pause that we have right now stronger than ever. They are going to be more confident in themselves because they have loved themselves and cared for themselves to give their bodies what they need so that they are at their very best. And when we're at our best, we don't have to fear a coronavirus or any other viruses out there because our bodies know what to do with it. And there's another camp that is being conditioned in the media right now to be so fearful and to not trust the body, not trust their bodies, and to feel that they need a chemical to help them to feel safe as they live their lives in the world. And that's another camp. I want to be really clear where I'm in. I'm not anti-vaccine at all, because some vaccines in the past have worked really well for the world, and we all know that. Diseases have been eradicated. But the vaccines that are made with contaminants and with toxins in the modern world, those are different than what we had in the past. So if there's some people that need them temporarily to get them through a rough spot in life and then not use them anymore, that's one thing. But to feel that we need a crutch, that we need a chemical crutch to survive in the world, and that our entire livelihood is going to be based upon our ability to have that crutch, it's a very, very different way of thinking. So there are some people that are immune suppressed, and people know that. And if they are, they need to take the precautions. And for those that don't, I'm going to invite you to honor your body and allow your body's wisdom and intelligence to do what it was designed to do, what it's done for 200,000 years. And that is to build the immunity to precisely what it is that we're experiencing right now. And when we do, I think we're a better world for it. So I'm going to talk about, the grief and things like that. I think, Kelly, another question you were going to ask about that. So let me just end with that foundation and then we can tie back into it as we go through the conversation. And I'd like to hear from Joe, hear how Joe feels about this.
Oh, well, thank you, Gregg.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting concept when the scientists study the causation of stress. And one of the things is not being able to control an outcome. And we're all living in a time when we just don't know. So we're not under control to when this is going to end or how it's going to end. When we can't predict a future, that's another indicator that stimulates the stress response. And the perception that something is going to get worse. When we have any of those three variations, we signal that primitive nervous system that begins to mobilize enormous amounts of energy to prepare ourselves for that imminent danger or threat. And in antiquity, it just has always been better when you are faced with the unknown to run from it. That's the best chance of survival. Yeah. And so everybody knows this, that you keep switching on that system for an extended period of time, and you live by the arousal of fear, the arousal of pain, the arousal of suffering, the arousal of aggression. It takes energy to activate those latent systems. And when we do that, our immune system is compromised. It's just the way it works. There's only a certain amount of energy. So the energy that's mobilized for emergency, for the threat in the outer environment, compromises the energy in our inner environment, and we are then more susceptible to the conditions in our outer environment. And as Gregg said, you have to look to see what keeps you in balance. And stress and living in survival is when you're knocked out of balance, knocked out of homeostasis. Well, we can tolerate that short term. But if you keep exposing yourself to the same stimulation, or you have the thought of some worst case scenario in your mind, you're actually knocking your brain and body out of balance by thought alone. And this is where it gets dangerous, because the conditioning response, the worst case scenario, the image we create in our mind and the emotion that we perceive, is a stimulus response that's conditioning the body to subconsciously live by the arousal of fear, as an example. So that internal environment becomes compromised and the immune system dials down. And why is that? Because we are more reactionary or responding more to the environment. So, and Gregg, you know this, that in a time like this, when everybody's feeling fear, that seems natural and normal. But what we're looking for is supernatural, and that's the new consciousness that has to emerge as a result of this wake-up call. This is a perfect opportunity for people to be in a retreat, but instead of being in some tent or some hut in the Himalayas, or being, in some hotel, you're in the comfort of your own home. And it's true, you break from routine and you're not going to the same place and seeing the same people and doing the same thing, and that causes you to step outside of familiar territory. So then when we practice the inward work, when we practice meditation as an example, and you have the ability to take a moment and be present and truly open your heart, our research shows that you are going to actually create a state of information that's no longer coming from your outer world, that there's danger in there. But when you start falling into the present moment and opening your heart, your immune system in 4 days can strengthen by 50%. Now, I know most people will say, I don't really want to do it now. It's just too hard. No. This is the time. This is the time that we've been practicing for. This is the time where it matters the most. These are the tools that we've learned. So what information then is your body receiving? Is it receiving danger in the outer world? Or in a meditation, it could feel safe enough that it can move into the present moment. And the moment that happens, energy starts restoring the body, and T cells and B cells start making those wonderful antigens that block viruses and bacteria. And now your body's so objective when you're in that state that it really doesn't know the difference between the real life event that's creating the emotion and the emotion that you're creating by that alone. That is exactly what strengthens the immune system. So you said it: physical stress, chemical stress, emotional stress. Then there's 3 types of balance. Physical balance, take care of your body. Emotional balance, this is a time when you have to find that center point and you have to self-regulate. and chemical balance. Just make sure that you make the right choices when the things you put in your body, and your body has an innate intelligence that will begin to memorize viruses and bacteria. And the bigger question is, why do some people get sick and other people don't? And usually the people that do get sick already have a predisposing condition that's maybe more vulnerable. So great time to be alive. Sure, we're all wanting to get back to our normal lives, but I do believe now what Gregg said is the truth, and that is that there will be a new consciousness of people that will emerge. And it takes a little pause in order for us to find out what's valuable to us, and then to learn how to take care of our inner world.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think we're being shown what's not sustainable in our own lifestyle choices and in our societal choices. And
Kelly, can I add something just to that, because there's something else that's playing out. This experience, this global experience, is an example of a battle that is playing out. You've often heard it said the best way to hide something is to keep it in plain sight. And there's a battle in plain sight. It's playing out in the mainstream media, in the textbooks, in the classrooms, what we're teaching our children. And it's a battle for our very humanness. It's a battle for our thoughts, our beliefs, and our humanness. And we're being conditioned to believe that we are weak and powerless, and that we need objects or gadgets to enhance our humanness. So technology is being developed, chips to be implanted into the human brain that help us to think faster, or wires under our skin, or chemicals in our bodies. And the irony of all of this outer technology, Kelly, is that it all mirrors what we already do in our bodies, but we're not being taught that we do these things. So this experience of a contagion and the conditioning that we somehow are victims in this world and powerless when it comes to what this does in our bodies, it feeds into the narrative that's playing out. And I think as we begin to embrace the deep truth of our humanness and live the life, love ourselves enough, live the life that supports us being at our best, that optimizes our immune system. We begin to cherish our humanness to a degree that has been discounted in at least the last generation. And I think it's important, that's a context within which this thing is playing out. So I want to say that before we get into some of these other questions. So thank you.
Yeah, I love it too, because as you start to become aware and you make these more empowered choices, and you start to feel empowered, then, you become aware of, like, even today, it just popped into my awareness, a pharmaceutical commercial that was on in the background. And I mean, the side effects were so horrific. I'm like, why would anybody want to get rid of a skin rash, but risk lymphoma and death? Like, but we're hypnotized, and they hide it in plain sight with, beautiful imagery or whatever. And again, it's like, this is not global anti-pharmaceutical, but it's just little tidbits of awareness as we begin to make more empowered choices. And we are in this kind of incubator right now to do that.
Yeah. No, there's a place for all of it. And if people need those things to help them survive what life has brought to their doorstep in a moment in time, that's why they're there. And by all means, I think, use them and learn from that usage. And then when you no longer need it, don't live the rest of your life on that crutch. Become stronger, more empowered. And this is, I think, we are globally developing a deeper respect and certainly a deeper respect and a deeper appreciation for the power of the human body. And it's very different from what we've been led to believe. I think the next questions are probably going to lead into more of those answers. So thank you.
And just to finish off this question, because, a lot of people wrote in questions, and even before the pressure that we are under in this global pandemic and all of these kind of changes in our lives forced on us, people were dealing with massive challenges in their life, beyond this, and they're still having to deal with them and navigate through this. So a lot of people were, there's a lot of suffering out there, and there's a lot of people that are in this immunocompromised category and have been trying in earnest to heal their chronic illness. They've been trying to make choices. They've been watching Heal. They've been doing, attending workshops, And if they, what can you tell them during this time, just to give them more hope and empowerment to navigate through this time? What can they do? And, I know, Joe, you guys talk about how quickly changes can occur in the body, like really incredible changes. What advice can you give them?
Well, I mean, listen, changing a health condition, it takes a Herculean effort. It takes an effort if you're facing a chronic health condition, because a chronic health condition is typically created by lifestyle. That's really what does it. It's behaviors. And so if people really want to begin to change, the first thing I think is so important is to gain as much information as you possibly can about understanding your body, understanding how your brain works, understanding how your heart works, in a very, very practical way. Understand really just the intelligence of what's possible genetically, even with this vehicle that we've been endowed with. And so the more we understand what we're doing, the more we understand the why are we doing it, then the how all of a sudden starts to get easier, because we can begin to assign meaning to what we're doing, and we can put more intention or more effort behind it. So the first step is the unlearning process. I mean, your personality creates your personal reality. That's it. And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So the present personality who's listening to this broadcast has created a present personal reality called their life. So that means if you want to change your life, you're going to have to change yourself. If you want to change your personal reality, we have to begin to look at our personality. So this doesn't mean you just start thinking positively and hope for the best. No, because if we're thinking the majority of the thoughts that we think every day is the same thoughts as the day before, well, the same thoughts lead to the same choices. The same choices will lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors will create the same experiences. The same experiences produce the same feelings and emotions. And those same redundant feelings drive our same thoughts. Now, here's the problem. Our biology, our neurocircuitry, our neurochemistry, our hormones, and even our gene expression is equal to how we think, how we act, and how we feel. So if you keep nerve cells that wire together, you keep thinking the same way, doing the same things, experiencing the same emotions, over time, the body begins to memorize. Through neurocircuitry, we hardwire our brain, and the feeling that we feel every single day just becomes a subconscious feeling. Like, most people don't even know they feel guilty, because that's how they normally feel. So that makes up 95% of our identity, our personality, by the time we're 35 years old. So it becomes a very subconscious state of mind and body through habituations, through emotional conditioning, through hardwired patterns, and so in emotional responses. So then the first step to change is becoming conscious of those unconscious states of mind and body. Now, most people don't like to do this because, as Gregg said, they'd rather get distracted by technology. They'd rather turn on the TV. They'd rather call someone up and complain. This is lighting a match in a dark place. This is all of a sudden, the word meditation means to become familiar with. So when you're sitting in a meditation and you're hearing words like, I can't, it's too hard, I'm never going to change, I want you to know that in that moment, you're not doing your meditation wrong. I want you to know that you're actually doing it right, because now you're becoming conscious of those unconscious thoughts that have been happening behind the scenes of your awareness. And if you're sitting there and all of a sudden you want to get up and quit, and you want to get up and move because your body's been in a program, and all of a sudden you become aware of that, or you notice how you speak and you decide not to quit, I want you to know that that's a victory, that you're executing a will that's greater than the program. And most people lose their free will to a set of memorized programs. If you're sitting there and your body is just looking for the rush of energy so you can get angry and agitated and frustrated, and instead of just thinking you don't have any control of that, you could settle your body back down into the present moment. You are telling your body in that moment that it's no longer the mind, that you are the mind, and that's a victory as well. And most people quit when they come up against the boundary of the known self. So now, stepping out of the known into the unknown is the perfect place to create from. So it makes sense then, if you truly wanted to change, and I've studied this when we studied spontaneous remissions. Well, the first question is, what thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? I mean, I think that's an important question. So when you put intention and attention behind it and you understand what you're doing, as you start to fire and wire those thoughts, if you keep doing it, you start installing neurological hardware. If you keep repeating it, repetition creates software, and all of a sudden, that will be the new thought in your head that says, I can, it's possible, anything's possible. That becomes the common thought in your head. There's no magic there. It becomes automatic because you installed it. And if you said, who am I going to be today? Well, how am I going to live? And instead of getting up and just starting a routine, while you sat there with your eyes closed, you rehearsed mentally the choices you were going to make and the things you're going to do. The research shows that if you do that properly, the brain won't know the difference between a real life event and what you're imagining. And if you stay present with it, you install neurological hardware. If you keep it up every day, it becomes a software program and you start to behave like a happy person. Then here's the challenging part. Can you teach your body emotionally how it can feel in a new future? That means that you're going to have to feel the emotion of an event before it happens. Like, so most people will wait for their healing to feel gratitude. They'll wait for the change in their health to feel wholeness. That's kind of the old model of reality of cause and effect. We're waiting in lack and separation for something out there to tell us that we'll be better in here. That's a very compromised way of living, because we live in separation our entire life and we're disappointed. But if you understand that the body is so objective that it doesn't know the difference between an actual experience that was creating the emotion and the emotion that you're creating by thought alone, and it's the environment signals the gene, you're signaling the gene ahead of the environment, and genes make proteins. So then by elevating your emotional state, you are telling your body now to move back into growth and repair. And the word meditation literally means to become familiar with, and that's what you're doing. You're becoming so familiar, so conscious of your old self that you will not go unconscious again. And then you are moving into a new state by firing and wiring and elevating your emotions. If you keep practicing that, it'll begin to become familiar to you. So then most people, they try it out for 2 or 3 days, and then after 2 or 3 days, they give up, and they haven't mastered a formula that teaches them how to heal. They just want the lack and the pain and the separation to go away. But many people that we've studied that actually heal, I want you to know that when they truly make those changes, they'll tell you that was their greatest teacher. They will tell you it was their greatest lesson. They're so happy that they had the experience, because they literally changed who they were from living in a familiar past and into a new future. And it takes practice. And the practice is what matters the most.
Amen. It takes a lot of commitment to change those pesky habits of ours.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I love, we talk about this in the Heal book, but you talk about how, a lot of people are trying to change matter from matter. And you change all the scientific research about the energy, the signature of the energy in the field, which you make stronger and more energy through your formula and your meditation, that determines the matter. So you're changing matter by changing your energy, and that's a lot faster, a more direct route than,
I mean, we live in a Newtonian world. We live in 3-dimensional reality, and most things take time. And so if you're working at it every day, shaving down those habits and overcoming those emotional states and emotional reactions, and you're becoming conscious, that is when you're no longer the program. You're conscious now. You're unconscious when you're the program. So that process sometimes takes people time to do that. And for me, in my own life, it sometimes we have to make our way. Why? Because we return back to our lives and we face challenges, and we're back, taking on the world again. But sometimes and we have scientists now coming in to study this, we see an instantaneous change that takes place in the body. I mean, it is immediate. There it is, and there it's not. Whether it's blindness, deafness, tumors, stage 4 cancer, we've seen it all. So then the fact that it's happening in no time tells us it's not an effect of matter to matter. This is energy influencing matter, and it's not matter that's emitting a field. That's the illusion. It's the field that's creating matter. So learn how to change information in the field. Then the hologram in three-dimensional reality begins to change, and it takes practice. And so when you see energy influencing matter like that, because it's happening in no time, it's a quantum phenomenon. That means that's information that's coming in, but the information that's carried on a frequency that your nervous system, once practice, can begin to transduce that frequency into meaningful information. And the autonomic nervous system in our studies show that it is so outside of normal in terms of energy. I mean, thousands and thousands, I mean, just way outside of normal in terms of the amount of energy in the autonomic nervous system. That autonomic nervous system is getting a very coherent message to all the other systems in the body, and the person gets a biological upgrade in a matter of seconds. Now, we've actually been able to study that process, and it is immediate. And when you see it happening in that immediate, you would consider that a miracle, but the person is transforming in that moment. And they never return back to the same person. That's when energy is really making the biggest difference in matter.
It's amazing. That's
can I jump in just for a minute?
Yeah.
Joe, I love it when you talk that way. I love, that's why I love working together. I love listening to everything you're saying. Same. Because we think so similarly, and our work is similar in that respect. But I think what's important when we're looking at this specific experience is everything Joe said applies to. Whoop! I just lost my mic. Everything Joe just said applies to our immune system. And if we ask ourselves, we have to be honest with ourselves first, and we have to ask, are there aspects of my life that make me immune compromised? Do I eat crappy food, or maybe I could get a little bit better sleep, or maybe I could exercise a little bit more. We need to be honest with ourselves about that. And what I hear from people is the frustration. They think it takes long periods of time to develop the new habits and for those to be reflected in the physical body. And the beauty of everything that Joe has just said, and the beauty of the research that we've done, what we see with our people, both of us and other colleagues of ours, scientists and researchers in our live events, is our bodies are so intelligent. The wisdom of our bodies will begin to respond to these subtle changes so quickly that if we feel that we have a compromised immune system, now is the perfect time to make those changes, get a little bit more exercise, eat a little bit better food, do a different kind of a meditation or a different kind of exercise, something. And the body responds so very, very quickly. And that is the positive feedback loop. And people start to see a positive change. Then they say, what I'm doing is working. And that is a really powerful catalyst to continue what we're doing. Joe, I don't know if you remember this. Joe and I were having dinner in Sedona, Arizona. And I think it was in 2016 or 2017. And we were both really studying telomeres at the time. And the research, the peer-reviewed scientific research was telling us that it takes months for telomeres on the ends of the chromosomes for them to stop the degradation, number one, to heal the damage that's already occurred, and to rebuild and regrow. And I asked Joe at dinner, I said, Joe, that could be true for someone who leads a typical lifestyle where they don't put any conscious focus into these things. But for the people we're working with, where we consciously are focusing on these, do you see any reason why it would need to take months? And Joe said no. And I said, I don't either. And we both began doing telomere tests, both for saliva and blood-based tests. And we were having extended programs, 4 or 5 days. And what we were finding is within 4 or 5 days, the telomeres were responding to changes that people were making in real time. And that is a beautiful feedback, positive feedback mechanism that tells us that when we make those choices to become the best person we can be, when we love ourselves enough to give ourselves what we need to be at our best in life, our body will respond so quickly. And the immune system is deep into everything that we're talking about here. And the beauty, and science is on our side. Physics tells us now that there is a place where time does not exist. So time is not as universal as we once thought that it was. There's a place, it's below the Planck length, where time does not exist. And what the studies suggest is that is the place where emotions and thoughts and beliefs, where they are occupying that realm. And so I'm not surprised that we would see instantaneous kinds of healings that we all know are possible. We saw it in the movie and we've seen it in our own lives. Because when we go to that place, we are actually going to the place where there is no space between what was and what is possible. It's the place where there is no time. And that is the power of, we are the only form of life that can do this consciously on demand because we choose to do it. No other form of life that we know of right now can do this. And that is part of the humanness that I referred to earlier, because we're being conditioned out of that thinking. So again, it's all the context for what's happening. It gives deeper context, deeper meaning to what's happening right now.
It's amazing. I mean, just that alone, but the 4 to 5 days, boost your immune system, lengthen your telomeres, so we just need to bite this off at, 4 or 5 days at a time. Don't think that it's going to take months. Just do it 4 or 5 days at a time. Commit. We are given an opportunity right now and a responsibility. So I love it. So, Gregg, you mentioned the grief thing earlier. I love that you mentioned this in another interview that I saw, because so many of us are on this roller coaster of emotions. And I think it's because we are now, a lot of our distractions have been removed. And so shit's coming up and we are forced to feel it. Or maybe we're given this container now to feel, because a lot of us, we suppress, we repress, we distract, we escape. So talk to us about this planet and grief.
Now, one of the first interviews that I did, as you can imagine, we were inundated with media requests and interviews, late February, early March, especially when all the lockdowns began to happen, because people weren't prepared for this. There was nothing in our awareness, nothing in our history that's prepared us for this. And the reason, I want to say this, the reason I made the presentation that became the film that you mentioned earlier was because a lot of our community, Kelly, pride themselves on not being plugged into the mainstream. So they don't watch television, they don't watch the news for good reason. I think a lot of good reasons, but the result was all of a sudden their world changed and they didn't know it was going to change. They didn't know why it was changing. They didn't know why the stores weren't open, the restaurants weren't open, why they couldn't fly. And that put them into a really difficult space. And within just a couple of weeks, what we saw was domestic violence was on the rise, child abuse was on the rise, suicide rates are on the rise, and depression was on the rise. And I was doing an interview when all these statistics were coming out. And what I said on the interview, I assumed was common knowledge. And the interviewer had never heard this before. And I said, we are a world in grief. And the interviewer said, what are we grieving? And I said, we are grieving the loss of a familiar way of life. It's different for everyone, but we've all lost it. And we must go through the stages of the grief that comes with any loss to get to the other end of this. Sometimes it can happen in a very compressed time period. It can happen in a matter of days if we are consciously addressing these. If we're not, it's easy to get stuck in the stages of grief. And when I think about these, no one has done a better job than Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her 5 stages of grief, typically that come with, we hear this a lot when we lose a loved one. The stages of denial that happen, and then the anger, and then the depression, and then the bargaining and the acceptance. Those are typically the 5 stages. And if you don't know that you're going through those stages, it's really easy. And I have a lot of friends that are depressed right now. And to give it a framework and to give it a structure is really useful. And the beauty is, once we begin moving into that bargaining and that acceptance, that's the point where we begin to imagine the world that is yet to be, and imagine our lives in new and different ways, letting go of what happened in the past, acknowledging that the past served us so well that we're here. I mean, it worked because we're here, but people keep talking about going back to normal. And when I hear that, I have this feeling inside of me, the world that we had only a few weeks ago, early February, that world is gone. And we don't know what this new world is going to be. There are some things that will be very similar and some things are going to be very different. And the people that I speak with, Kelly and Joe, I don't know about you, but and myself included, there are aspects of the world from the past that I prefer not to go back to. Having the time where we're not traveling with the intensity, having the time, you know, we've been socially distanced, but not necessarily socially isolated. And I think people have come together in community stronger during these weeks than I have seen them in a long time. I often say this, I say, if you're going to have a global pandemic, it's really good to have it in the technological age so that we can stay connected. So I think we're going to see stronger community emerging on the one hand, but I hope that we have learned that we feel better, and there are things in our lives. The sky is clear in Beijing for the first time. Dolphins are in the San Francisco Bay. They're swimming in the water. I live in northern New Mexico. Our skies are bluer than I've ever seen them. And I hope that we can choose the kind of world where we appreciate those and some of those things can remain. But it is the acknowledgement of our loss. Now, when I say that we have to grieve, doesn't mean that we've got to have like big crocodile tears all the time and, you know, break down in deep primal sobs under a hot shower in the bathroom, although some people do. It can be as simple as saying, yes, I miss the world that I knew only a few weeks ago. I miss going to my favorite restaurant. I miss hugging my neighbors. I miss hugging members of my family that live, 2 blocks away. For me personally, my mom is in a memory care community that has been locked down. She has only one lung. So my mom is very susceptible to upper respiratory infection. And she has been quarantined. She doesn't know me anymore. She's a late stage dementia, but I miss seeing her, and I mourn that. And I mourn the ability to have the freedom to move in my community and to move on the planet the way I did only a few weeks ago. And just acknowledging those things, saying what's true in our hearts and in our minds, and sharing it with another person, that can be sometimes all it takes to move through from one stage to another, and how we feel about it. And once we do that, we free the emotional and the psychic space so that we're not clinging to what has been, and that frees the space to make room for what is yet to be. And we're choosing that right now by the way we respond to what is happening in our lives, what life has brought to our doorstep. And this is where we're either choosing empowerment or we're choosing to be victims. We're going to be masters, or we're going to be victims of something that we can't even see with a microscope. And technically, biologically defined, a virus isn't even alive. A virus does not meet the biological definition of life. So think about it, something we can't even see with a conventional microscope, and that doesn't even exist as a life form, has just brought this planet to its knees. And we're making the choices right now about our own personal power in the presence of that. So
yeah,
that's what I want to say about grief.
Right. You say that, the virus it's not a hunter. It's some predator out there floating in the air trying to latch onto someone. It's literally a message, a coding, right? It wrapped in protein. It's, obviously there's a metaphorical message being transmitted.
It's very, very simple. This is an RNA virus. It's very simple RNA wrapped in a gelatinous protein that is very susceptible to the environment. It's susceptible to some disinfectants, susceptible to heat. Obviously, they say when the weather gets warmer, we're going to see it a lot less than we are right now. But it really comes back to the way we've been taught to think about ourselves. I mean, we can't control what's happening in the world. We 100% control what's happening within us and how we respond to the world. And we're being asked to go to the deepest core, the deepest truths of human existence, and embrace the wisdom of our bodies and our humanness in the face of this contagion, and to trust that our bodies, and this is the question, people are afraid of dying because they don't trust their bodies. They've been taught not to trust their bodies. So.
But you guys see that, it brings me hope that you say that you think there's going to be stronger community, because I feel like right now separation is like getting a flare up. Everybody has the masks on, which, we're looking outside ourselves at this virus, or maybe some other person's going to infect me. And I feel like separation is at an all-time heightened state. So, I love, Joe, your Go Love, you're spreading a viral love meditation to start connecting people through the heart and through meditation and intention and language. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, but, is this really, are we going to come out of this more conscious? Can these systems that are not sustainable, globalization, will we actually go back to a more local, in season, natural, in rhythm with the natural world, or is this just going to be a blip and short memory? And in 2022, we're just back to the same we've always been.
Are you asking me, honey?
I'm asking you both, but yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
No, we have great research that when you get a community of people together and they know how to elevate their emotional state, and they know how to change their physiological state as well. And you don't have to be a Buddhist monk or a yogi to do this. We know that it's a technique like anything else. That if people do this properly, there's more energy that goes to the brain, and there's an ambient field that's created around the body. The heart is actually releasing information in the form of frequency. That frequency is energy, and it's carrying information. And when energy makes it to the heart, this is the place where there's the center of polarity or duality. This is the union of opposites. This is where our wholeness begins. And when we do this properly, if you have that a community of people, like 1,000 people in a room, and they're creating that kind of heart coherence, if they can lay the thought, the intent on that frequency for the greatest good, say people in the front of the room wearing a heart rate monitor, it's very surprising to see the majority of those people who are receiving that energy, that their heart goes into coherence at the exact same time, the exact same day, and the exact same meditation. So there's non-local effects that are happening to a person's autonomic nervous system, that they are being entangled or entrained to some frequency. So I thought, well, God, goodness me, if that's the truth, you could do it with a person sitting, within 10 feet of you, or you can do it to someone on the opposite side of the planet, because that is what the quantum field is. There's no separation in the quantum. There's only connection. In fact, it is an invisible field of energy that connects everything and unifies everything materially. And people are fooled by their senses into separation. And so I thought, well, what if we create this kind of fun game where you call up, you send someone a video message, an audio message, a text message, or you call them up on the phone, and you take a moment and you tell them what you love about them. Now that is going to drop the veneer, the facade, this kind of protection that we have. And we saw our community do this with such sincerity. And the moment you start doing that, you can't not feel love because you're expressing it. And it puts the person who's receiving it in an altered state as well. And they're more prone to receive love because they're starting to feel the same energy, the same emotion. So then the person goes into a meditation then, it's called Go Love 20, and then it's a 15-minute meditation on the understanding that they can entrain someone else. And when we love somebody, we want them to feel what we feel. So the way we typically do that is we give, but that's one way, matter to matter. So we're putting them into our heart and seeing once we do this, what the effects are. And then they take it and then they turn to someone and they do the same thing. And we've had over 50,000 people now doing this little thing. And it's a way to create a network of love that, in fact, is a different consciousness than the consciousness of fear, of pain, of suffering, of importance, control. This is, we tend to be more selfless when energy makes it into our heart. Now, that is a new consciousness. Imagine that people were so familiar with the feeling of love, they could regulate to such a degree. And we've seen oxytocin levels in some of our studies go so high off the chart. And oxytocin signals a chemical called nitric oxide, which signals another chemical called endothelial-derived relaxing factor that causes the arteries in your heart and lungs to literally swell. So now, with the same kind of reaction that we have in our sexual organs when we're aroused, that same intensity happens in the heart. Now, when that occurs, there's a reset in a person's baseline for trauma. Their immune system, their thymus is getting a lot of energy, their heart is regulating properly. That's a new consciousness. That's a consciousness that cares for one another, that tells the truth to one another, that supports one another, that informs one another, that heals one another, that shines for others so that they can shine, that considers the others when they make a choice. That is a new consciousness. And imagine that feeling being constant for you instead of fear. Imagine that feeling. And the research on oxytocin says that when you feel just a little bit of love, or you have a little bit of an elevation in oxytocin levels when it's externally administered, that it's impossible to hold a grudge. In other words, this isn't something where you're trying to be spiritually advanced and saying, I forgive you. This is, I feel so good. Listen, I feel so great. Forget about it. I don't care. I'm free. You free yourself and you free someone else. So there is a new consciousness emerging, and you realize that no government, not many doctors, no teacher is going to save anybody. It's a time where we have to really choose ourselves. And the collective consciousness, if that we can do this, creates a network that is transcendent of space and time. That is a new consciousness. And that's what we need in order for us to begin to make this world a better place. So it makes sense. The old has to fall apart. Political models, if you look at politics, the economic model, the medical model, education, religion, the environment, all of that is being stirred up because there's a new consciousness that is actually changing our awareness. And why is that? It's because of information. And information, in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. That we don't need an authority, a doctor, a priest, a governor, a teacher to gain information. We gain information now because of technology. The question is then, if knowledge creates awareness, and awareness creates consciousness, or is consciousness, and consciousness is a change in energy, you got to come out of your resting state, then anything that's not consistent with that new consciousness is going to create disorder. And chaos. And chaos is just unpredictable order. It's information that's being released. It's novelty. It's newness. It's no longer routine. That's where we're at right now. So why not in this time say, hey, I was part of that changing consciousness that changed the planet. I remember that I retreated for 2 months or 3 months or however many months. And I used my time wisely, and I forgave everybody in my life, and I did the work, and I practiced. And when I walked out into the world, I was different. And I noticed that a lot of people also were different. That's exactly what it's going to take to begin to change this world. And so created Go Love 20 just as a way for people to do it. It's still going on. There's thousands of people doing it every day. Our numbers keep growing. What's the intention? Spread it in the world. See what happens. Just as an experiment. See what could happen.
I love it.
Joe, I'm just going to jump in. Joe, I love your Go Love 20. Thank you. And, you and I have had the opportunity to talk a couple of times in the last few weeks. We didn't talk about that specifically. But that impact, I mean, Kelly, I'm actually seeing, I'm optimistic, not only about us as individuals, but on the global level. I have a lot of irons and a lot of fires behind the scenes working on other projects. And one of the things I'm seeing is the leaders of the nations of the world, for the first time in my memory as an adult, are not standing behind their technology, and they're not standing behind their armies and their military and their weapons. They're looking at one another as humans with families, with children, with husbands and wives, with a common goal to get their nations through this. And all of those leaders are responsible for the lives of hundreds of millions of people, and they feel that responsibility. They express it differently, but they feel it. And so I'm seeing them working together in ways that we haven't, for a very, very long time. In the Middle East, this is happening. It's happening in the European Union. It's happening between the U.S. and a lot of the people we're dealing with. So the question is, when the threat is no longer present, will they continue this level of communication? And what Joe is talking about, although we experience it as individuals, it feeds the field that you mentioned early in this conversation. If we had longer, I would tell you about it. As a scientist, as a degree geologist, I can tell you that the fields that envelop our planet respond to these fields. And I cannot help but think that what we're seeing between our leaders somehow is benefiting from what's happening with us as individuals. So I'm encouraged on that level. And I think as individuals and as communities, I think communities are becoming stronger. I see it now in our local communities here. I live in a rural area in northern New Mexico, but I think we're being reminded that localized living is the key anytime, and especially in a time of extreme. So localized sources of food, localized economies, localized sources of energy, localized commerce, localized finances, localized healthcare, all of those things are more sustainable in general. And when something like this happens and the supply chains of the planet break down and you can no longer get from the other side of the planet, the things that you were accustomed to getting on a weekly basis, it really brings that into focus. And I think we're seeing a lot of people, both locally here in my community and also on the national level, saying, we've got to rethink the way that we're living. And here's why it's interesting, because the mainstream narrative is just the opposite. The mainstream narrative is to centralize everything for control and power, when what is sustainable and what works for us is localized living, so that we can take care of ourselves when these kinds of things happen. So I am optimistic because we're given sustainable models. Whether we choose those models is going to be up to us and how we live our lives as we emerge. And I think there are going to be two camps. I think there's going to be one camp of individuals, as Joe mentioned, that are going to feel very strong, very empowered, and they will have a strong immune system. And there'll be others that have chosen another path, but they're going to look at those with a strong immune system and with love in their lives and with healthy children, and that fearlessly go into the world. And they're going to say, I want what they have. And I think by modeling that, we do work in community and we all come together. So I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realist. And I think we have very real reasons to be optimistic about what happens in the next weeks, or I think it's a matter of weeks as we emerge from this unprecedented experience, this experiment in global pause.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was very, be the change you wish to see in the world, and you guys are both helping us do that. And now is the time. And we're going to respond to each other and to life and to our planet differently. So thank you guys so much for generously, sharing your heart and creating amazing things like Go Love 20, starting the love virus. And Gregg, and Joe, you guys are the gushing that's happening in the comments. You guys are just rock stars, and I'm just honored to know you and have you on and share your wisdom here. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for everything that you do.
Yeah, Kelly, thank you for your love and your vision. My brother Joe, I love you. I don't see as much as I'd like, but I love living on this planet with you. And I do love when we get to work together. I know you're going to go for a walk in nature, so we enjoy that beautiful walk as the sun's going down, okay?
Thank you so much, Gregg. I love you.
And I can't wait to have you both for real.
All right.
Both.
All right. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I know that a lot of people had technical difficulties if their internet wasn't super fast. The video recording is available for the next 24 hours and maybe after. So love you all, and go do the work. Let's show up. All right.
Love you too, Kelly. Take care. Bye-bye.